Okay, so let's move on to task 1.5. So basic call forwarding. So we're instructed to provision James Ford's phone, which is extension 3002, so that if a call is ringing into him, that he sees the calling party's name and number, as well as the original party that forwarded a call to him and the last party to forward the call. So we're dealing with call forwarding. We're basically saying if there was a call that was forwarded to James Ford's phone, he would not only be able to see the calling party name and number, so those two pieces of information. So what was that referred to as earlier? CLIP? Well, actually, CLIN, calling line identification name, and CLIP, calling line identification presentation. The presentation number. And then as well as the original party that forwarded the call and the last party to forward the call. So in order to understand this, before we go a little bit further into the next few bullets, let's take a look at understanding a little bit about call forwards. All right, let's change our color. So if I have a phone, let's call this 1001. Got another phone, 1002. Now, 1001 goes to call 1002. Let's just take a look at some terms. What is 1001 known as? Calling party? What's another term that can be used to exchange with calling party?
Caller ID.
Caller ID. What's another term?
Number.
Okay, the alerting number. I'm actually looking for one other term that may not be as proper as it could be in some settings, but it's generally helpful to refer to them as easy, 3 or 4 digit, 3 or 4 character numbers. What I'm looking for is actually ANI. Okay? 1001 is the ANI. Actually, I'll just go ahead and turn on everyone's mics for these discussions so that anyone that wants to go ahead and speak up can go ahead and do so, just like Mike was, and I'll turn down my speaker. Okay, so ANI, or automatic number identification. What is 1002 going to be referred to as? DNIS. Okay, dialed number identification service. So the call lead number. Now, if 1002 forwards a call, whether by manual forward or call forward busy, call forward no answer, really doesn't matter, to 1003, then who is the DNIS now? DNIS was 1002, and David puts in through Q&A that 1003 is now the DNIS. That's correct. Okay, well, you can only have a calling, you can only have one ANI, and you can only have one DNIS. So what does that make 1002 at this point? The redirecting number. So the RDNIS, the redirecting DNIS, or redirecting dialed number. Okay, so that's good. We've got that handled. Now, let's say that 1003 forwards to 2001. Oops. This makes 2001 the DNIS, the call lead number. So what does 1003 become? 1003 is going to be the RDNIS, the redirected DNIS. So then wait a minute, back to 1002. What does that make 1002?
Doesn't that depend on what checkboxes we have in the DN as far as original call party flags?
Well, that's actually ultimately what we're getting to, but it doesn't have anything to do with what 1002 is in terms of the life of the call, just what somebody sees. And that is ultimately, you're correct, Michael, that is ultimately what we're getting to, but in terms of what 1002 is, It doesn't have anything to do with it. So 1002 doesn't change. 1002 is still a redirected DNIS. He just happens to be the original directing number. Okay, so now 2001 forwards to, let's say, DN 3001. Actually, let's take a look at our task because I believe we're instructed to create something very similar to this. Let's see. Okay, set DND on Hugo Reyes' phone, 1002, to enabled, and set Eloise Hawking's phone to call forward all to 3002. So if we remember, we just did in basic ring settings and call forwarding, we set Hugo Reyes' phone to call forward busy to 2001. So we're turning DND on his phone so that when his phone is called, it will forward to Eloise Hawking at 2001, and we're going to forward her to 3002. Okay, so we're going from 1001 to 1002. Hugo will 1002 forward to 2001, and then that will call forward all to 3002. So let's go ahead and bring up that scenario. So that was 1001 to 1002. Here. Okay, so 2001 is where this is going. And then 2001 was going to forward to 3002. Now that's where we're going to end our task, but we'll just look one more at an example here. So what if 3002 forwarded to 3001? 3001 becomes the new DNIS. 3002 becomes a RDNIS, or a redirecting DNIS. So the reason I added one more here is to display the idea that, first of all, the ANI never changes. The DNIS changes as we go from forward to forward to forward. But there's still always only one DNIS, or one dialed number. I shouldn't say one dialed number, one call-led number. As we go along, each DNIS, if it forwards, becomes an RDNIS, or a redirecting number, or a forwarding number. But there's still, all of this information is kept up through the entire life of the call. So the fact that the call originally went to 1002, that is kept, and actually when we get into other modules that deal with other servers in the Unified Communications Suite, one being the Unified Contact Center, or CUCCX, especially Contact Center Express, but also Enterprise as well, but we won't be dealing with that one for now. We see that they have the ability to reference dialed number. Now, dialed number will always be 1002. Why? Because that is the number that 1001 actually put in the keypad. In their little... When they press the digits on their keypad, that's my bad attempt at a keypad there, they dialed 1002. So 1002 is actually still the dialed number. But it's no longer the DNIS. It's now a redirected number, but it's also still known as the original redirected number. 3002 down here, okay, if 3001 is the new final DNIS, 3002 is the last redirecting. Now 2001 doesn't really have any special nomenclature about it. It's just a redirecting number. We typically don't care about anyone that was a forwarding station except for the original forwarding station and many times the final or last redirecting or last forwarding station. typically don't care about any of the other people in between. What we tend to want to know is who was the original person to forward. Also, what is the dialed number? What did the user actually intend to get, no matter what they ultimately did get or not, whether it was voicemail or 15 phones on down the line or 911. Someone had, set up something not so great as a forward. Whatever they ultimately got, we do tend to want to know what did they dial. So what was the dialed number? So this original forwarded number would still be the dialed number as well. Okay? So in terms of what do we want displayed on this phone? And actually, let's just go ahead and back up one level, because we need to take a look as it pertains to our task here. And I wanted to add that extra layer of abstraction to talk about the fact that the middle redirecting number is typically inconsequential. So we will remove, not sure if it was going to be faster to do this and erase manually or just to redraw the whole thing, but I think it'll be faster. Okay, so he's no longer going to be our DNIS, he's just going to be the DNIS. So 2001 will be okay, so now what we're concerned with, if we look back at the task real quickly, is that in the above test where the call's already been forwarded twice, if James, well actually no, sorry, that's not the correct one, is that James' phone, if a call is ringing into him, so he is 3002, this is James' phone, call's ringing into him, that he sees the calling party, so the ANI and number, as well as the original party that forwarded the call and the last party to forward the call. So what we're saying is that we want this phone to see, we want it to see ANI, we want it to see original redirecting, and we want it to see last redirecting. Now this is going to be a lot of information on the screen, and I'm not necessarily advocating or suggesting that you would want to do this too often in real life. We're just looking at the overall complete functionality and capabilities. That's really what we want to see on the screen. Okay? We're also told to, well, let's go ahead and do that first. Go ahead and initiate that configuration before we move on. So 3002, branch 2, phone 2, should be James Ford phone. So what we're seeing is, and actually all these are already checked by default, these are the two that are checked. Forwarded call information display on this device. Now, why are we going to this device, which is 3002, versus any one of the other phones here, their DNs. Here, DN here, DN here. We're only issuing the configuration on this DN because see that this is information on this display, on James Ford's 3002 display, about forwarded calls. So it's forwarded calls to him. So we want to know caller name and number and redirected number and the dialed number. Okay, so remember the redirected number. So first of all, caller name and number. This is the calling party name and number. Okay, so that's the person that was originally calling. This is the ANI. These are the ANI. Then we had redirected number, we bring up this overlay, the redirected number was, in terms of CUCM, at least on this page, it doesn't make the differentiation. I'm not saying all of CUCM, but on this page, CUCM doesn't make the differentiation between original forwarded number and last redirecting. It essentially says the last redirecting is the redirected number. Okay, so this is specifically what we want for the ability to see the RDNess, the last person to redirect. And then remember we mentioned the dialed number is the original dialed number as the user, case 1001, making the original call, dials it on their keypad. This is the dialed number, 1002. Here when we select dialed number, we are saying we also want to see the original forwarding number. That's another way to look at that. Otherwise, if that wasn't the case, redirected number and dialed number would be repetitive, wouldn't it? It would be the same thing. But in this case, it's not. We're going to select all of them. Go ahead and click Save. And if we look back at our task, now we're going to add this on. But we were told to set the DND on Hugo Reyes' phone. So let's go ahead and turn his DND on. Okay, DND should show up here as active, so it will forward to 2001. 2001, we're actually going to, I can just click this little guy right here, open, oops, what? Not going to open, that's good. There. Back to find phones, and back to Eloise was branch 1, phone 1, 2001. And we'll tell this to call forward all, oops, not to voicemail, but to, what was it, 3001, I believe. Yep, sorry, to 3002. Forward's phone. Save there. We'll go ahead and restart that phone. Have that restart over here in another window. We don't need to restart anything on Hugo Reyes' phone because DND obviously doesn't need a restart. Maybe not obvious, but it does not need a restart. So now we can go ahead and test the functionality, and then we'll add this second bullet point on. Okay, let's tell this to search for it again, make sure the phone is registered. It is. Up, and we need to add on one more phone. (2002). Okay, so now we've got the loop. So Jack is going to call over to Hugo, DND is going to forward to Eloise, and Eloise is going to forward to James Ford at 3002. All right, so we'll go ahead and place the call from 1001 to 1002. And we see that James Ford, phone is ringing. These two forwarded them. Forwarded for the calling party name of Jack Shepard, the calling party number of 1001, for Hugo Reyes, that was the dialed number, by Eloise Hawking. We can't quite see 2001 here. In fact, you can't see it on the real display either. Okay, so it's a lot of information. Maybe, and very likely in most cases, too much information. But the important thing is we know that what each of those checkboxes do. Okay, so Jack Shepard, that was over here. Okay, so on the line, caller name, that's the Jack Shepherd bit. Caller number, that's the 1001. Redirected number, that is Eloise Hawking. Okay? Eloise Hawking is the redirecting. It's being forwarded by Eloise Hawking. And the dialed number was for Hugo Reyes. He was the dialed. He was the intended party. Are there any questions regarding any four of those checkboxes here, or this information, or even our overlay? We'll put back on a white background in just a moment, before we move on and add more information. Anyone's welcome to go ahead and speak up or key in any questions if you have any so far. Okay. If no questions, then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and answer this call. Actually, I'm going to put mute on here. Up, so I can also put mute on here. Feedback. And the screen goes black. Awesome. There we go. All right, now I see from Jack Shepherd. What I don't see, if I go back to my task, is the next bit. Bullet 2. Ensure that there's some sort of information that displays on James Ford's phone indicating that this was a forwarded call, even after the call has been picked up by him. But we picked up the phone on James' phone, and we don't see any indication of a forward call. We see from Jack Shepherd. We don't see anything forward for Jack Shepherd. Okay, so let's go ahead and tear that call down to bring up some form of additional information or additional configuration to accomplish that. Now, we don't really see anything here on this line indicating that. So does anyone have any idea where we might go to look for it? It's actually going to be under System and Service Parameters. Specifically, we'll pull up either server, as long as the heading says cluster-wide parameter, and it will. And we'll pull up the Cisco Call Manager service. Once this loads, it's a good idea, and I think I've mentioned this before, really a very highly recommended good idea to go through and, after you've clicked actually advanced, look through every single section and understand what everything does. Okay? Again, if it says cluster-wide parameter and then in parentheses what that parameter is, so devices in general versus like devices for PRI or devices for SIP, devices in general. With cluster-wide parameter, we only need to make the change on one or the other, or however many subscribers we might have in our cluster. If it doesn't say cluster-wide parameter, like these first three, CCM call throttling, system, and SDL trace, and there's a few others, then we actually have to go do it on each individual publisher and subscriber in the cluster. Okay, so we're going to scroll down. Now, we could take a look at each one of these, and we're actually going to, probably through the course of all the deep dives, look at almost every single field. We're not going to sit here and, if looking at every feature on a phone was going to bore you, this would take an enormous amount of time. But we will be looking at some very specific ones. How would you find them in the lab? You would want to do left, maybe search for something like forward. Notice what we find. Cluster-wide parameters for the feature, call feature of forward. And we've got, looks like about 12 or 13 there. We counted them. Now, what you'll want to do is, again, click on the field name, which brings up context-sensitive help for that field. And actually, there's going to be a scroll bar, so I'm going to bring it over, but that'll mess up where I'm at. If I leave this open and then click on any one of these, it'll bring it right back to where I want it, but with it extended over. Okay, so what I actually want, and I would mention when you're reading through these and trying to understand, if the field name isn't definitive enough, or maybe it seems like it is, there might be more information under the hood, you very well just may want to, even instead of just looking at these values, or field names and values, look through the context-sensitive help and read through this. And also when you do your finds, open up this window and do a Control F for find, and then search for, maybe forwarded, or something like that. You'll tend to find a lot more information, including the values that in HTML text boxes and drop-downs cannot be searched for with a find. It doesn't look for information there, but in this context-sensitive help field or web page, it will actually show you not only the default, but also the minimum maximum values and any other specific buzzwords or keywords. So what we're actually looking for is a field called retain forwarded information. And this parameter determines whether forwarding information displays to the called party after the party goes off hook. The default is false. We're going to change it to true. Press save. Now, some of these features require restarting either phones or gateways, or sometimes even the CCM service on any active CPEs or call processing engines, of which we have two, a pub and a sub. Because we have subscribers doesn't necessarily mean that they're taking calls and acting as call processing engines. Okay, so now we've gone ahead and changed this retain forwarded information true. Typically when they require you to restart a phone or a service, they'll tell you not. I think they're actually pretty good about, if I can, off the top of my head, I can't think of one that does require a restart of any devices that they don't tell you about. There was times in the past where sometimes you have to restart something. I think for right now, everything is fairly well documented. So now we'll do the exact same call again. We're going to call from Jack Shepard's phone to Hugo Ray's, and it's going to be forwarded by Eloise Hawking. And I'll go ahead and hit mute here. And then after I answer this call, notice once this displays, it's actually not showing right now because of the... Oh, no, I thought it was because of the bottom microphone mute. So this actually may be one of those that's not documented well, but in mouth, that we have to restart the phones for. I do not believe that we have to restart the... Let me make sure. Yeah, it does say update successfully. Okay. Go ahead and restart those two phones. So that was 1001 and 3002. Start those two phones. Really, all we should have to restart was James' phone, 3002. Okay, make sure refresh is turned on at a rate decent. Okay, so I'm actually going to go ahead and turn off auto refresh on these just so that it doesn't get off. All right, so go ahead and dial 1002 again. Now we see that it's a forward Jack Shepard. So we see after the fact that James goes off hook, we retain information about it being a forwarded call. Now, why do we want it? Well, in this example, we didn't really illustrate a reason why we would want it. And whether you can come up with a example right off the top of your head or not, Sometimes I can from past customer history. I actually can certainly come up with a reason why I might want original dialed number to display or redirected number, and why sometimes I might want to even show that it's a continued to be displayed as a forwarded call. For instance, I actually have a shared office space here in Columbus where I'm doing the recording, and so there's a lot of other people in this overall general office, and whenever the receptionist answers a call, she answers the call on behalf of any one of the various companies that are represented here. Okay, so if she answered a call for me, although I don't really have her answer any of my calls, she would answer it, Internetwork Expert, Mark Snow, or Mark Snow's assistant. I'm not exactly sure what exactly she says. But she needs to know who the call was originally for, but then somehow that, it was for me, but it's ringing into her. So essentially we could set up a specific DID for me and have that ring to maybe some form of a dummy DN, that is a DN that's not associated with the line. People call it dummy DN. And that phantom DN could have my name as alerting information, and then her phone could be set to display original dialed number and retain information about it being forwarded. And maybe my number could have that, or my phone could have that set up as well, my line that I'm answering the call on. And that way she can see that the call rang in for a specific DID, which was destined for a phantom DN for me, so she knows how to answer the call. And it displays right in front of her. So that's just one example. There might be many reasons why you might want to do that. You may very well not want to do that, but it's certainly good to know for your real-world implementations, either be they in-house or consulting clients, or, and maybe even more importantly if you're here, possibly Cisco certifications like the CCI voice exam. Okay, we've got one more thing to add to this, so let's go ahead and look at our last bit. In the above test, where the call has already been forwarded twice, if James should attempt to forward the call again, it should fail whenever Jack initiates the above call. Forwarding James' phone or go ahead and forward James' phone to 3001, and then place the call from Jack at 1001 to James, well actually to 1002 to Hugo, forwarding to Eloise, forwarding to James, and then James forwarding to 3001 to test. You should hear reorder tone. You can unforward when you're done testing. So what are we essentially saying? We're saying now that if James at 3002 should forward the call one more time to another DN of 3001, then essentially this call forward here fail. And if Jack, who's making the call here over to Hugo, he makes that same call and forwards, or attempts to forward, it should fail and Jack should hear reorder tone. So what is this doing? How many times are we forwarding it here? Well, let's see. It's forwarded once, twice, 3 times. Okay? So we're essentially saying that there should be, well, I shouldn't say essentially, it could be interpreted a couple different ways. And again, part of our task here is to begin to prepare you for how the wording of the CCIE voice exam will be, or even other certifications that may not give you exactly what they want you to do in terms of what they want you to configure, what fields, what values, but they will tell you the functionality that they want to occur. And so we very clearly did specify the functionality. If the call had already been forwarded twice and James attempts to forward the call again, it should fail whenever Jack initiates the above call. Okay, so here we're saying, or one way to interpret this is that the third forward will be the maximum amount that it can be forwarded. Okay? Actually, let me ask you, so how do you view this? What we are getting at here is the ability, or specifically we're looking for maximum number of forwards, maximum number of hops in a forward. And as you can see in service parameters in just a moment, as I go ahead and press mute to let everyone give me their feedback and ideas, and I navigate over there, what I want to know is what value am I looking for this field, for maximum number of forwarded calls, or hops.
Since we don't want the third forward to be completed, we want to set the max hops to 2.
Okay, so we are looking for forward maximum hop count. This parameter specifies the maximum number of times that a single call can be forwarded or diverted. It has special considerations for QSIG, which we won't take a look at today, so we really don't care about any of the rest of this because it's dealing with QSIG. Special considerations for QSIG. So Michael's saying that we should change this value to 2. So the maximum hop count for forwarded calls to be 2. Well, let's just test it. All right, so let's place the call. First of all, let's just make sure that it rings normally to James. Okay, it rings normally to James. So it was forwarded once and then twice, James. But now, when we set James to call forward all, actually we have to probably take a look at his, and I'll open this in a new window. Branch 2, phone 2. Take a look at the calling search space on his call forward all line, which isn't set to anything. Probably doesn't matter because they all contain internal DNs. We're going to forward all to 3001. We'll actually see about call forward all should probably be set here. Shortly. Well, it is call forwarded all. So now let's go ahead and try this call. There we go. Here it shows forwarded to 3001. Let's go ahead and try the call now. Now we're calling Hugo, who's forwarding to Eloise, who's forwarding to James, and we're getting reorder tone because the maximum amount of forwards has now been violated.